Alright, hey guys, and welcome to the spoiler review of Malignant. So I just got to watch this film. It's reasonably fresh in my head, and I realized IMDb gave this a 6.3 as well. And to be honest, I thought they'd be giving it higher because usually they side particular famous directors to stay safe and whatever. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of James Wan, especially the first and second Conjuring. I think those two are really, really good movies. I even think that Aquaman is decent, except it just didn't align with the whole Justice League arc. But on its own, I think it's a decent movie. And of course, there's a few other movies that James Wan has come up with, and he's actually I think he's from my country as well. So yeah, I mean he's a great guy, maybe a great director, but *Malignant* was not one of his good movies by any means. This is a bad movie, and I'm gonna about to go through the entire like gist of the plot with you guys. So spoiler alert once again. So this is how it works basically. We start the story with a doctor in some sort of a mental asylum or a treatment facility where she's doing some kind of research on what do you call this particular test subject that she calls Daniel, and Daniel apparently develops some kind of psychic powers, and he kills a bunch of people in the asylum, and then they capture Daniel, they sedate Daniel, and then they tie him up, they strap him to a chair or something, and then she says time to remove the tumor or something like that. So right away it felt really like it took me out of the immersion because of the sudden dialogue where she just stands still, stares at the camera, and she's like, time to remove the cancer. And I'm like, why are we like, okay, never mind. I thought, fine, I'll let that slide. Maybe it's just that one scene that felt a little bit cheesy. But the story continues at the place of this lady, who is Madison Mitchell, and she has a sister as well, who is like sort of a side character in the story, but actually like given a lot of time, a lot of screen time. The sister's given a lot of screen time. There is a detective, Kakoa Shaw, given a reasonable amount of screen time as well. There's another detective, Regina Moss. Regina works pretty closely with Kakoa, but there are times when Kakoa actually does his own investigation, so Regina is not on screen. And then we see a bunch of other doctors who worked in the facility for treatment of the one they called, what do you call this? The so-called malignant character in the story. I'm not sure if that guy actually has a voice. Mm, Give me a sec. Let me look it up. Right. So Gabriel apparently does have a voice. Gabriel's voice is. It says here, Marina Mazeppa, uh, physical performer. I think that is the action star of what Gabriel is. Gabriel is actually the monster, so-called Ray Chase, right? So he's voiced by Ray Chase. Regardless, Gabriel usually communicates by sending his telepathic thoughts into any kind of electronic device. So he uses cell phones, radios. He uses like the toy phones and whatever, and he communicates via that means. And right after the what do you call this? We cut to Madison. Madison's story is basically she's with her husband and she's pregnant, and apparently she has lost two other pregnancies. And then her husband and her have like a little argument, and then he accidentally pushes her and slams her head on the wall. And I felt like after this point everything just looks so stupid in the way the characters do certain things, because she starts bleeding from the back of her head, and he apologizes, he rushes to get some ice, and she locks herself up in the room that she got herself injured, and she just goes to sleep. Like, dude, you just got knocked in the back of your head and you're bleeding at the back of your head. Shouldn't you, like, if you don't want to trust your husband and take ice, like the ice he's bringing, at least call 911 or something, and go and get yourself checked, because head injuries could be serious, you'll never know. But right after that, we cut to a scene where her husband, who is exploring around the house, gets assaulted by this creature with long hair that's shadowy, and it kills him. It kills her husband, and it moves around the house. It chases her, and the chase scene felt really slow and soft. And at that point, I already realized that there has to be something else going on, because the way the creature killed her husband was really, really fast, and the creature actually almost got to her. It prevented her from leaving her house by shutting the door like an inch away from her face. So the creature is really fast. It can definitely catch to her, but she still managed to run up the staircase into a room and close the door. After which the creature actually pushes the door, breaks into the room. She falls down, and we cut to another scene. So we cut to the scene where the detectives are introduced. They come and investigate the murder of her husband, and basically they're discussing the possibility of she herself killing her husband, because there's no sign of breaking and entering. So at this point, I already had my suspicions that it has to be her. Maybe the creature is something that's inside her in some way. But how is that related to Daniel was my question. And also the fact that when Daniel was actually trying to be killed in the mental asylum, we actually can see that Daniel was wearing some sort of pajamas and was a kid. And since the scene cut to several years later, it is possible that it is still just her, and Daniel is her alternate personality, something like Split. So I was going to the alternate personality psychic kind of plot line. I thought that's most likely it. And later on, it turns out that's exactly it. There's another personality in her, and it has some psychic powers, and she is the villain all along. So, the suspense is not really there. It's super predictable. I think like 90% of people would have predicted the plot. I think maybe a small group will be like, I have no idea what's happening. Who could it be? Who's Daniel? She's not a guy. It can't be her, right? I mean, these things are really dumb. These things would have worked like 20, 30 years ago, but we have seen all of that. So there's nothing really new being done to twist the plot or turn it or anything like that. And also, we move on to the part where Daniel continues to do other murders, and then we finally get to a cool scene where she's actually in like a room. She shows up in like a room, and the world around her changes. And what it looks like is that she's stuck in the world where Daniel is doing killings, and she thinks she's still in her house, but she's actually the one doing the killings in the other house and in the form of Daniel. So Daniel appears with long hair and is always represented completely black, so we don't really see a face or anything like that. But I think it's a bit too predictable, at this point that you kind of know, it's her. And then eventually they build to a few more murders, and the detectives start to investigate and find out that all the murders are of people who previously treated Daniel in the facility, and it all sort of links up. And then they find a photo of a patient called May, and the photo of the patient May is later found out to be this lady, who is now grown up. And well, she turns out, I mean, they kind of prove the evidence that she has to be the killer. They rush to her house, and she denies it for some reason. I don't know why she would deny it at this point, because I mean, I think she knows. Actually, it's so weird. Like, if the character is intelligent enough, even they themselves would have realized that it's them. So she's in some sort of a denial state, is what I could conclude. And then all of a sudden, there was one person she kidnapped, and she kept in the attic of her house, and that person comes crashing down in this particular scene and ends up in a coma. It's later revealed that that person is actually her birth mother, basically the birth mother of her and Daniel. So only later on there is a scene where the detective actually chases after Daniel when he's actually trying to kill someone. And that's probably the coolest scene in the entire film, where the creature is running backwards. It's like in Tenet, right? If you watch Tenet, how people run backwards. So it's something like that. The creature is running backwards, is doing all the actions backwards, and the detective is chasing after it. So the concept and the scenes are really awesome. There's even a fight scene that Daniel performs. That's probably why they had another person to do the stunts for that. And the body of Daniel is basically the body of the main character sort of flipped backwards with the bones and whatever rotated. So there is a decent amount of gore in this film, but not something that you can't completely digest or anything like that. Right, so her name is Madison Mitchell. Actually, her name is actually something May. I forgot what it was, but it's something May. So, well, eventually, after the awesome fight scenes and whatever, we get to the point where the plot actually should matter, but it doesn't really because um, it just comes down to a point where there's this decision between Daniel trying to kill her sister. Basically Daniel tried to kill her sister when she's young also, and they do investigations. Like she and her sister actually go and visit her adopted mother, and the adopted mother plays some videotapes of her when she's young, cutting cakes, celebrating birthdays and stuff like that, and she's actually whispering Daniel and stuff like that. So I felt those parts were interesting. Character is smart enough to do some investigation of her own. I felt that was pretty cool. But her sister actually does investigation by going all by herself to this abandoned building, and I thought that was absolutely stupid. It's so dangerous, and characters still have not learned. There are also some moments where characters just stand in the dark waiting to die because I don't know, they clearly can't see in the dark because they go for the light, but they only go for the light like 10 seconds after the creature runs to their face. So all these cliches are just a bit too much, I feel. Like it's a step back from The Conjuring 2. Because in The Conjuring 2, you actually see characters do a lot of intelligent stuff. They know their house is haunted, they call for someone, they get backup, they prepare. All of these intelligent things are not seen in this film. This film basically keeps your brain aside, you know one more time, basically to go backwards one step. That's what I feel, at least. So towards the end, the main character has to make a decision between killing a sister and fighting against Daniel, and obviously she wins the fight. She just all of a sudden locks Daniel up inside her head, and it says that whatever you can do, I can do now. And then she's suddenly strong. She's suddenly capable of controlling Daniel. She can lift a bed all of a sudden and save her sister. And it makes absolutely no sense. She turns into a Mary Sue in the last 5 minutes of the film. And that's it. After she saves the sister and she doesn't kill her because she's not Daniel anymore, no one knows what happens after that. There's no closure basically given to the character of Daniel. So, what Daniel really is sort of a conjoined twin that is attached to her from her spine all the way to her brain, but backwards. So it's sort of like Professor Quirrell from the first Harry Potter. Do you guys remember the first Harry Potter, the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on whether you read the book or watched the movie? Basically, Voldemort lives at the back of Professor Quirrell's head, right? So Voldemort's like a face at the back of his head, and so Daniel is living at the back of the main character's head, and that's why the character runs backwards when Daniel takes over, because Daniel, for him it's forwards. And I felt this was super predictable because all of this started after her head injury, and the fact that the character runs backwards and whatever just kind of made me realize that it's Professor Quirrell. We are watching Professor Quirrell. It has to be what it is. And yeah, so it's super predictable. Nothing really new, nothing special. The only amazing scene is the action sequence, which I think is done really well. I've not really seen such a good action sequence from a horror movie. I don't think there are many out like it. Regardless of that, the horror aspect itself is not really scary. The jump scares are really cheesy. Characters do absolutely stupid things. The creature itself is not scary. Like the Daniel, even when they reveal the face of Daniel, it's not scary. Probably because there's no suspense, and also there's like plot holes in the story because the main character actually calls him the devil. And Daniel has some ability to control electrical equipment, and none of those two things are ever explained to the end. Like, is there some kind of supernatural, what do you call this, side to this story? Or is there some kind of sci-fi side to the story? Is there a reason why Daniel can control electronic equipment, and is there a way they can control him or prevent him from doing it using certain electrical equipment? Like, there's nothing intelligent there, nothing absolutely done there, and whether there's any relationship to the devil or anything supernatural as well, that too is not really shown. So Yeah, it's just some kind of conjoined twin that all of a sudden is a psychic and can control things and uses her body to run backwards like Professor Quirrell to attack people. And yeah, that's the story. So, yeah, I guess you guys can tell that I'm not too keen on this film. If you ask me, should you watch it? Nah, you can skip this one. It's not really that great of a movie. Still nothing beats, I feel, the Conjuring 1 and 2. We don't talk about the third one really, but the first two are really, really good. So I'm going to pull out a rating here, and I think I think it's a reasonable rating. There we go. It's a 3 out of 10 for me, and the most of the points in this actually go to the action sequence, which I felt was reasonably amazing. As for the story of the child from the mental asylum that's raised to realize that she has an ugly past, I think we've seen too many of these stories. There's nothing really new, nothing creative from it. There's also nothing creative in the way that they stop Daniel. Like no one stops Daniel. The main character just suddenly says, "Now I'm in control," and sort of like how Captain Marvel's all of a sudden just learns how to use her powers. She all of a sudden just learns how to use Daniel's abilities, and she suppresses Daniel back into her head. And yeah, the story ends. It seems like there is a possibility of a sequel, considering Daniel has not completely been stopped. He's still residing in the back of her head, but obviously the main character is going to be put into prison, and I don't think that Daniel can do much after that because Daniel can take bullet shots and he can get wounded. He's still a physical creature. He's not able to pass through walls or anything like that. He is slightly stronger than your average male, or probably even a super athlete, because he can lift a bit or whatever, but he's not ridiculously strong to a point where he can like bend metal bars or anything. There's none of that kind of crazy stuff. So yeah, there's still some sense of possible logic and whatever. I think it's closer to what's that movie, uh, to Split. Yeah, it's closer to Split in terms of the strength that he has. But as for the story, it's super predictable. There's really nothing to it. There's nothing special in the story at all. It's completely disregarded. The action scene is the only thing I feel that deserves some points here. And of course, the main character's acting is also reasonable, but all the dialogues are cheesy. The rest of the characters are really nothing special about them. They tried to make them likable by giving them some cheesy lines and quips and some kind of like temporary romance drama or whatever, but none of that ever kicks in. Like none of all of those are empty plot points. Like they make it seem like the detective and her sister have a thing, but it amounts to nothing. They make it show like the CSI lady, like this investigator and the detective have a thing as well, and none of that amounts to anything either. So there's a lot of things that are shown in this film that amount to nothing, which means there's no value to the story itself. And the story itself is super predictable, as I said. So it really comes down to just the action and the effects, and also there are certain like CGI effects, especially, that felt super low budget. Like even the very first scene when Daniel kills her husband, the entity appears to be a dark creature that slams his head against this wall, and it looked super low budget. I don't know why, it just looked super weird. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, see you guys in the next one. Adios.